Hello, and welcome to the first seminar of the Summer 2025 Digital Classicist London series. Hello to all of our audience here live in London and to everybody watching online on YouTube. Today we've got Matteo Romanello from the University of Zurich here with us in London, and Charles Pletcher from Tufts University, who's joining us online to present Introducing Kōdōn, a minimal computing library for publishing digital commentaries. So I'll hand straight over to Matteo to begin the presentation.
Thank you very much for the introduction. It's very nice to be here. It's been a while. I will not say how many years since the last time I presented at a seminar, so it's really nice to be back. So before going into Kōdōn, I will start with presenting the research project that has led to actually creating this JavaScript library. And as you can see already from the logos here, it's been a collaborative project between the University of Lausanne and the École Polytechnique Fédérale of Lausanne, which is the Polytechnic University in Lausanne. I wanted to start with with saying what I'm not going to talk about. So the talk is not about Scholia, it's not about ancient commentaries. And we did focus on modern commentaries, but of course, this is where modern commentaries stem from. So from the practice of writing marginalia to the manuscripts, notes, margin to the text, that has eventually become a whole genre on its own, with publications that can vary in terms of layout, but they do contain the commentary, a commentary about the text. So what you see here, it's a sample of the commentaries we covered in our project that focused on Sophocles and Ajax. And as you can see already by the colors, the typesetting, so the layouts of the commentaries can vary quite a lot. So you can go from commentaries that have like a whole page with only the commentary to those that have primary text in Greek or Latin and then translation side by side. A critical apparatus might be there or not. This depends on the choice of the commentator, and also you have different typefaces. Like for example, you might recognize backlines, Gothic to the right. Sometimes you have a single column for the commentary or two horizontal columns for the commentary. So layouts do change, but always the same genre of publications. Here in Senate House, you also have a very nice library. But this slide that we do like a lot, we also say that when we started the project, kind of the most efficient way of using commentaries was still this. So despite the fact that lots of the commentaries we worked with are available as digitized commentaries, like for example on the Internet Archive, so that they are available in digitized format, they have some shortcomings that are such that this is still that working with printed commentaries probably is still, because we haven't changed completely the thing, but the most efficient way of working with them. Just because pulling the right page of your commentary when you're working with a PDF, given that there is no any kind of logical structure about the play or your text in the PDF, it's a bit cumbersome. Letting alone when you're working with 12 or 15 different commentaries and you have them all on your screen. So we thought, 2020, probably the digital could do something better, a better job of allowing scholars, especially who want to work comparatively with these commentaries, or to do something a bit better with it. But yeah, this was at the time the best way. So you go to a library that has virtually all the commentaries you need. You have a desk that you're going to use for the full week or 2 weeks of your stay, and then you pull all the commentaries you need from the shelf, lay them on the table, open them at the right pages, and then off you go for the week or 2 weeks of study. And then shortly after the project started, the pandemic hit, and then there was no access to the physical libraries any longer. So doing this kind of thing was not straightforward, and then was even a stronger motivation for us to try to do something with the digital medium for commentaries. So just a few words about the context of this project. So it ran 2020 to 2024, funded by the Swiss National Science Foundation. It had three main goals. So the first goal was to develop, we worked on Sophocles' Ajax as a sort of a case study, but the idea was doing this while at the same time trying to develop a generic pipeline. So we were not trying to solve only the problem of commentaries to Ajax, but hopefully building something that would work. I wouldn't say for any commentary, but for many other commentaries. And we did work with some Latin and Greek commentaries as well. So try to come up with a pipeline robust and generic enough to work with as many commentaries as possible. And the second big goal was to develop a digital platform that would work in a similar way to the physical desk with all the books there, allowing scholars to do comparisons between what the different commentators say on the same bit of text. And in doing this, also, of course, studying, once you can see all the commentaries from 2 centuries side by side, then you can also make some nice considerations, interesting considerations about the commentary genre, things that also have been noticed by other people, like, for example, the tendency to be repetitive, so the traditiousness of commentaries, these sort of things. We also had the chance to investigate them a bit. Was not only me, and especially the things that we present today was mostly the work of Charles Pletcher, who at the time of the project in the last year joined us as a research software engineer, but he has a PhD in classical comparative literature and is a software engineer. So one of those rare people who have 2 hats, very complementary, and most of the things we present today were made thanks to him. Sven Meyer was a PhD student on the project, and he worked on the computational side, so what I'm going to show in the next slide. And then we had also the very precious work of student assistants, helping us especially with annotation, with manual annotation of some data, in order then to be able to train some machine learning models. So I've started from the multi-commentary because Kōdōn, as a platform for publishing digital commentaries, was initially developed for the visualization of multiple commentaries. And then at a certain point in the project, in the development of Kōdōn, we realized that it could have been kind of a standalone library on its own, also generic. So then we went into making it a bit more standalone. But it really was born as part of this multi-commentary project. So here, I will not go during the presentation a lot into this. That's a different story. But if you have any curiosities or questions later in the discussion, very happy to answer them. Just wanted to provide a bit what is the technical workflow, the technical pipeline that is behind the multi-commentary that I'm going to show you in a few moments. So that is actually built by having this pipeline that starts with digitized commentaries. So imagine either the commentaries on the Internet Archive or commentaries from another digital library. Some of them for the ages, we did digitize them in the project because they were not, for example, those under copyright. So we start with digitized commentaries that gives us images of pages. And then you need to extract the text in a meaningful form, hopefully with a certain good accuracy, and also reconstruct the layout. So as we've seen before, the layouts can vary a lot. So you want to be able to separate the different parts of the page according to their function and role. And this is what is done in the optical character recognition and document layout analysis phase. Once that phase is finished, then you have hopefully good Greek text, and we did have some quite good progress on the quality of the OCR, especially for the lines that contain both Greek and Latin script. They were the most problematic ones. Once you have that Greek text with a good layout recognition, then you have essentially the main problem of teaching a model or recreating in digital form this linking system that scholars are using that very much resembles hyperlinks in web pages. So as you probably, if you're familiar with commentaries, you will know there is a lemma. The lemma refers to the text being commented upon. The text can be showed on the same page or not. And the lemma works as an anchor. So the lemma tells you this is the word or the lines or the line or the sequence of words I'm actually commenting on. And before the lemma linkage and enrichment, there is no notion for the machine or the model about this linking. So that's something that we try to reconstruct manually. So first by identifying the actual lemma, which is relatively easy, it works pretty well, and then try to automatically create this link, which is much more complicated. We did try, not great result, first result, but that was a problem that no one had tried to crack before. So there was also no starting data, no benchmark, no evaluation to start from. So we had to do it all ourselves. But once that is done, then you have a bunch of commentaries that are chopped into chunks where each chunk refers to a lemma in the text. And at that point, you can build a multi-commentary visualization like the one we did that is trying to, well, not really mimic, but provide kind of a good surrogate of the experience of the scholar in a very nice library. So I'm going to switch to the, I guess I need to stop this and reshare the whole screen. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, so that's the where you can find the multi-commentary, but also I will take you briefly through how it looks like. I hope it's feasible. I can also make it, perhaps try to make it slightly bigger. Yeah, but that's fine. So what you have is on the left-hand side, you have the navigation of the text. So in this case, it's a tragedy of the Ajax. So you have the division into the prologue, the paradox, the dramatic structure of the play. Then at the center, you have the primary text without a translation. In this case, we took as a reference-based text, the Lloyd-Jones edition of the Ajax. The first thing you notice is this highlight, that it's also possible to turn it off because also for another reason, but because after a while your eyes tend to go a bit like, can be a bit heavy on the eyes. So you might, if you need, just read the text. But if you want to see the density of comments, of glosses by commentators on the text, on lemma on the text, then you will see it via this type of highlight, which is essentially a heat map. So a heat map uses darker color to indicate the density of the comments, of the glosses by the commentators. So here, for example, the word ascopon, that refers to the visibility or not of Athena, for example, in the prologue of the tragedy, is something that has received quite a few comments. What you can do once, of course, it is not, we're not just happy enough with seeing that people have commented. We want to see what they have said. So when you click on a lemma, then you're able, then automatically the interface selects and brings forward all the glosses on that lemma. The text you see here it's OCR, and being OCR, there are some errors. And for this reason, we show the page image on which the OCR was performed. So to give the possibility to the user to double check the transcription against the text. And also, for example, if you look at backlines fracture, also to appreciate the actual text in its original form. So if you're really keen on reading the fracture of backline, then you can do it full screen. But then if you're happier with our transcription and OCR, then you can read it here. And of course, you can filter things, because sometimes you want to look at all things at the same time. Sometimes you just want to focus on certain commentaries. We do also have a bit of a kind of a beta feature, the possibility to see. So here with the highlight, you get a visual representation of density. But sometimes you want to be able to analyze also this data if you want to do some quantitative study, for example. So that's where it might be interesting to have it as a table. This is a bit obscure because there are lots of CTS URLs that Charles will explain in a few moments what they are. But it also tells you the number of the exact number of comments that that a lemma received in all the commentaries that we have. So one thing that I should say about this is that in the bibliography, we have the list of all the commentaries we use in the project. But then, since there is copyright, what you are able to browse and see in the multi-commentary that is online, it's only the public domain subset of the commentaries we work with. So you will not find, unfortunately, the Finglas, the Garvey, and the most recent commentaries on the text, all those that are still under copyright. With this, I will pass it over to Chaz. To take you a bit into a kind of deeper dive of Kōdōn and also of the technical concepts like CTS URLs that enable all this.
Thank you, Matteo, and thank you everybody for coming to this talk. Hello. It's very strange not being able to see people. This always throws me off online. So if I trail off, that's fine. So I will dive in here and talk. This is I'm kind of going to take first a quasi bottom-up approach to how we arrived at the idea for Kōdōn, and then look at Kōdōn from a top-down approach and what we want it to do. Somehow I skipped ahead. So we started with a fairly straightforward client-server web application with a database that would have needed, pretty routine maintenance. Nothing crazy, nothing super invasive or demanding, but it would have required upkeep. So we have the OCR and NLP and the TEI XML of the commentaries, the critical texts, and some ingestion scripts that help with the alignment. Those would have been ingested, or they had been ingested into a database that then works with the multi-commentary server to dynamically provide readers what they want. So readers make requests, the multi-commentary hits the database responds with the relevant critical text, glossi, and lemmata, and then the server again presents that to the readers in a way that they can understand. We still have this code available. You can do a Docker compose up, and it should basically work if you point it to the right open source commentaries and things, public domain commentaries. But we've since simplified it by cutting out the server, as it were. So we still have our ingestion scripts. We were able to preserve those, and I'll talk about why those are important if there's time, and a little bit more about what they do. But rather than having a database and a server that dynamically serve each request, we pre-compute the pages that we want to display based on the structure of the critical text. So as Matteo said, here we have a pretty bog standard ancient tragedy. So it's divided into prologue and exodus, and then the episodes in stasima. We save these in a static markdown and JSON format. Markdown was kind of a compromise because it allows people, editors specifically, to write in a lightweight format that doesn't require them to know TEI-XML. I'll talk a little bit more about the syntax of that markdown because we borrowed some ideas from other markdown libraries. And then we've turned the multi-commentary itself into multiple line-delimited JSON files that preserve the lemmata and glossae in order and tokenize them, do all the things that we need to do to make them properly addressable. And those pages go directly to the readers. So this can just be stood up on a very simple server. Right now, it's running on GitHub pages. That is mainly the decision to use GitHub was not out of any fondness for Microsoft. It was because a big part of the audience is people who are not familiar with the technical aspects behind this. And while they might not know about GitLab or Codeberg or Bitbucket or some of the other friendlier hosts for pages like this, a lot of people nowadays have heard of GitHub. So that was just one less thing to worry about as we were trying to get readers and get some feedback on how this worked. So Matteo already showed you the interface. Matteo has set up some persistent URLs for both of these in case we need to change the canonical domain for some reason. The yellow button, which you did not see in the version, is because this is only in development mode. And I believe that only runs on the full-fledged server as well to get some debug information. And then the meta commentary we'll talk about a little bit more. This is a commentary on the commentaries that are included in the Ajax multi-commentary using the exact same tech stack. So that was one of the really cool things that we experimented with. And I at least, I don't know, always pleasantly surprised when something works, when it quote unquote just works. So that was really nice to see that we could put this into practice. So I want to add an asterisk here to a minimal framework or a minimal library for digital commentaries or a library for minimal digital commentaries. Right now, that is kind of what Kōdōn is because it imposes the use of certain other libraries that it kind of wraps together and presents to the user. As long as you put your texts and configuration in a certain way, it will build this application for you. But the ultimate goal, I think, is for Kōdōn to be more of a component library that works with critical texts and commentaries to make it easier for anyone to stand up a born digital edition using static site generation. So rather than saying you have to use this specific static site generator, as we say right now, we want to make it a little bit more, even more flexible than it already is. So we took the name from Ajax line 17, when Odysseus describes the sound of Athena's voice as like the sound that comes from a bronze-mouthed Etruscan trumpet. Thinking that in some ways what we were trying to do is amplify the reach of these commentaries and make them more accessible to a wider audience. We took a lot of inspiration for the minimal computing approach from static frameworks like Wax or Ed. Specifically, the idea grew out of an implementation of the IIIF server in a static form, where we said, okay, we're going to use Wax's idea that you can have a IIIF setup that doesn't need like a Cantaloupe server or anything, but just uses the file system to mimic the IIIF API. Once we realized we could do that, we thought, why not just use the file system for CTS URNs and mimic the navigation of the text as well? I'll get to how that works here. You can see I've talked about a lot of this already. We removed the database and instead just pre-generate the pages based on a configuration. So in the case of Tragedy, it's really important that the editors add the pagination that they're after, so that they split the play according to the critical base text that they want to use, in this case, Lloyd-Jones OCT. For something like Homer or something that has more textual divisions, Kōdōn has kind of a built-in default to take the second deepest level of text. So if you have the Iliad, Kōdōn will paginate by book. That's still really long for a web page, but it's a lot more manageable than all 24 books of the Iliad at once. We built these JS components using SvelteKit, which is a lightweight JavaScript library. It's less lightweight than it used to be, but it's still very adaptable, and in my experience, a lot more dependable than React or Vue, although there are still some moving parts. The same for anyone else who has worked in modern front-end development. I'm sure you're all familiar with the jokes about the node modules folders and constantly updating and conflicting dependencies and things like that. We really wanted to avoid that as much as possible. So we chose a framework that seemed to prioritize stability over, becoming the next new thing. At some point, it would be nice not to use an external framework at all and just depend on native web components or something like that, but I don't think we're there yet. Users and editors can also add their own pages. So you saw with AJMC, we have an about page and a landing page and a bibliography page. Those you can add through configuration. So conceivably, you could also just add a blog that talks about the development of your particular commentary. We are working on adding filters for user-defined tags in addition to allowing the filters by author that you saw, so that you can add a tag for, say, like one would in Zotero. Say you're working on a specific project, you want to gather all of the glossi that fit under that project's rubric with a tag that represents that project, and then filter them by page. That's something that we're hoping to support by the end of the summer. So these are the core components of Kōdōn, essentially. You have a text that is in TEI XML. This gets transformed into an intermediate format. You have your configuration that brings all these things together. You have the IIIF facsimiles, the glosses, which we say are in Markdown. They are in Markdown. That's the format that they're parsed from and turned into HTML for the browser. Thanks to Pandoc and a couple of tiny filters that you can find in some of the repositories for Kōdōn or Kōdōn-related projects, we're able to ingest things like Word documents as well. Pandoc makes that really easy. I can't take really any credit for that transformation. Just that Pandoc is a brilliant library. And then we support JSON exported bibliographies from Zotero. So if you just export the CSL JSON and use the config to tell Kōdōn where to pick that file up, it will include the bibliographic information. You can cite things using the familiar at and then the citation key syntax with page numbers and stuff like that. So one of the first challenges that one encounters when trying to write a commentary and render a commentary on the web is that we think of commentaries as these deeply nested hierarchical structures, which turns every application of a glossa to a lemma into a tree traversal problem. That's not a particularly accessible conceptual model, nor is it a very performant way to build a commentary. So we borrowed an idea here from Prosemir, which is a well-known and well-used, battle-tested, as I say, editing framework, text editing framework for the web. So rather than having this nested structure that you can do in HTML or XML, where you have a paragraph, a string, then a strong tag, a string, then an M tag, and a string, and then closing the tags in order where they're nested, we treat them linearly, and we group text runs based on shared properties. So these properties can both be text decoration, as in the example here, but they can also be the comments that apply to a specific run. So when you have a glossa that spans multiple tokens, all of those tokens get grouped into the same run. And then if you have overlapping glossae that don't necessarily span every single token, we split the runs so that each one with its shared tokens is kind of grouped together. Here's an example from the first thing that Odysseus says to Athena. So let's say that we have these pretend comments, A, B, C, and D. The first run, A and B, applies only to IMN. When we add C, we get another text run that includes the comments A, B, and C. When we add the comment D, we have a third text run that is just the token RTU, and then D only applies to that token, right? It's only talking about this patronymic. And so we go back to A, B, and C for this fourth text run here. CTS URNs are essential to this function and essential to the addressability of commentaries in general nowadays. These, my understanding is that they were born out of the Homer Multitext project, and they borrow from the standard, W3C URN specification. They all have this URN prefix and CTS protocol. There are various collections that exist. Most of my work happens with Greek Lit and Latin Lit. But there's Middle English literature. Perseus has a bunch of different text collections available. Then we have a text group here, which in this case refers to Sophocles. Many of the text groups under the Greek literature collection use the TLG numbers just because they were already widespread when CTS was being developed. You'll notice it's called text group instead of author because it can be multiple authors. The authors could be anonymous, things like that. Then we have the work. So this is the abstract concept of Sophocles' Ajax. It does not refer to any particular edition. It is the idea that all of those editions point to some shared notion of a text. The version, Perseus GRC2, is the specific edition that we're working with here. The part, this is really a citation. So this is line 1 in this case, but if you were working with Iliad line 1, it would be 1.1. And then separated by an @ sign, you can have subreferences. And these subreferences are indexable starting at 1 and counting up from there. So there are two ways basically to read a commentary. There's the linear way, which is to go through the commentary's own structure of a text. And there's the citational way, which is to say, okay, this commentary is addressable by the canonical citations in the critical text. Here's an example of Allen and Greenaw and how they split up Cicero. And you can see there are like recognizable canonical citations there, but these headings or subheadings are not going to appear in other editions of the text. They do something similar in their commentaries on the letters, where they have these paragraphs that are meant to be read linearly, almost like a story in and of themselves. The reason that I bring this up is because a lot of times commentaries mix these two ways of reading. And part of the task of a digital commentary, in my view at least, is to make it possible to traverse the commentary through both mechanisms without needing to mix metaphors and generate weird and deeply nested XML structures. So this gets back to the idea of flattening everything out. Kōdōn is being used in a few different projects right now. We are porting Gregory Naja's Homer commentary and Pausanias reader and commentary in progress to Kōdōn. Kōdōn can also be used for collaborative work and partial commentaries, where there are also plans to start using it pedagogically, so that students can have a commentary hosted in a Git repository where they add glossae as they work through a text together, and this becomes a collaborative practice where everybody gets credit for the glossae that they add through the magic of Git commits. And they also learn about digital humanities rudiments like TEI-XML and Markdown, alongside their learning Greek and engaging with classical texts. So at this point, I think I should hand it back to Matteo to talk a little bit about persistence and future proofing. But I'm happy to take any questions if sorry?
No, finish, please. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go, Chas.
No, that's all. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for this explanation. Before going into the future proofness of the commentaries, I wanted to try do a live demo of how to edit the multi-commentary. So let's hope it works. I should be sharing the whole screen. Can you see it?
Put it up when you're not looking at StreamYard.
Okay, fair enough. Cool. So we do have different GitHub repositories for the things you have seen so far. So one for the multi-commentary itself, one for the library, and one for this sort of prototype of our own commentary on a very few places of the areas, just to demonstrate how creating a new commentary would work and how that interacts with a multi-commentary. So before showing how to add new glosses, so this is what how the meta commentary looks like. So you can see authors is me and Charles, and you have a couple of comments here. Of course, being we couldn't have done without commenting on Kōdōn and on line 17, where the name of the library comes from. So the interesting thing, apart from the content that you can read, but what we tried was to kind of reflect and compare the other, what the other commentators have said, reflecting, for example, when certain simile started being introduced and become prominent. And then whenever you want to refer to the actual comment or glossa by another commentator, you can make your own. You can create a direct link that will point to the multi-commentary, to the very glossa that you want to refer to. So you're not just pointing to Herman's commentary, but you're pointing to where Herman comments about Kōdōn. So there is a whole interlinking possibility, and all powered by the CTS URLs that you can see here at the top, that can be very verbose, but they tell us open this comment with the glossa of that commentator on this specific lemma of the text. Other things that are here, which I'm going to show also in the Markdown in a moment, is your own bibliography. So when you're writing your own commentary, you might want to have your own bibliography. So here you have the possibility of creating your bibliography, exporting from Zotero, and then referring to it in your own glosses. Which brings me to show you how they actually look like. So I wanted to start from kind of cloning all the way, but in order, for the sake of time, I will start from what I've already cloned. So if I go into the meta repository, I will show you how these glosses look like. So as Charles was saying, it's Markdown. So you might be able to recognize some Markdown syntax, which for those who are not familiar with Markdown, it's text with a very kind of some sort of pseudo syntax for common things like bold, italic, very slightly more complicated, only slightly more complicated syntax for hyperlinks. So this is the hyperlink I showed you just before, pointing to a glossa by Herman. This is how you would encode that link in Markdown. And here, similarly, this is how you would encode the link to the Perseus library for this simile from the Iliad, for example. Other things that you have to provide in order to create the commentary is the commentary configuration file, a TOML file. I will come to this in a second, and a base text. So this is the bit that comes in TI-XML. So the reference text to which you point when you create your commentary starts from an edition, if it's available. Otherwise, you create your own. Here we have the edition by Lloyd Jones, encoded by Greg Crane, that was already available, put up on GitHub. We reused it. And that is the starting point for us to link the comments to it. And all this is defined in this configuration file. So the configuration file has a bunch of information, like, for example, you can configure the name of the folder that contains your commentaries, the name of the folder contains the editions, and the kind of auxiliary pages like the landing page, the home page, the bibliography, the about. So it's all customizable. And then you will edit the content of these pages as separate Markdown files. As you have seen, there is also a prologue, a YAML prologue to each commentary file containing information about the authors, about the publication date. So all this to kind of provide also, especially if we think in a collaborative setting, having students or having other scholars collaborating, tracking provenance and acknowledging the credits of who has written what. In order to install it, so here I installed it already, but using npm. So npm is the package management system of JavaScript. It's a bit like pip for those familiar with Python. So you would install the Kōdōn library, and then once it's installed, you can run it locally. So this will spin, in your own browser on your machine your own commentary. So here we can say a copy of the multi-commentary. There is a small problem that I was having before related to this secret file. This should do and remove it. Yeah, so here you have it, the same that you have online with the two glosses. So if now we want to add a new glossa, this will come, we can either copy paste it into the same file as before, or we can create a separate Markdown file so that different editors work on different files. So here we added one where I want to have the translation that Charles has done of a quite long glossa by Lobeck, so 1835 commentary in Latin on the word INS in the second episode. For those not familiar with Latin or reading fluently commentaries from the 19th century in Latin, could be useful to have an English translation. So let's say I want to add a glossa with this translation. How would I do it? So here, I've added it already. Let me remove it, just because I want to show you actually how you will copy the CTS URL that allows you to create. Same problem as before, I think. Yeah, so if we toggle the highlight, when you select the text, instead of copying the text, it will produce the CTS URL of the section you selected. So if I want to comment on the word INS, I will just select INS. I will copy paste the CTS URL, and the CTS URL I can then put it in the at the very beginning of the declaration of my new comment. So I will show you how it looks like. So each new glossa that I write for my commentary will have to start with these two URL declarations. The first one is saying which lemma I'm commenting on. And this is the bit that I would copy paste from the interface. It's exactly the same. And the second one will instead create a URL for my own comment. So in this case, I'm saying just giving the meta Pletcher ID to its own comment so that his glossa will have a specific identifier. And then once it recompiles, if I haven't done any error, I put it there, I spin it, and then I will have my my comment showing up with a translation of Lobeck's commentary, and here I'm able to refer back to the glossa that is being translated. Only a few examples here, but you can imagine writing your own commentary on your own text. And also, as Charles has already mentioned, the multi-commentary and the meta-commentary, despite the fact that you don't see it here from the link, they are both running on GitHub pages. So they are statically compiled. They run on a GitHub pages website, relatively easy to set up. If you don't want to have it on GitHub, it can be GitLab. And just to finish on the the use cases, Charles has already said something about it. We can come back, for example, on the pedagogical use of all this with students if you're interested in. And I just wanted to share a few thoughts about the future-proofness of all this, which was one of the things that we really strive for in the project, in trying to make this, for what it's worth, as long-term preservable as possible. And unfortunately, the Internet Archive has come back online. But this afternoon at 2, I think, after lunch, we tried it with I was trying it before the talk, and the permanent URLs that we had set up, they were not working any longer because there was a temporary outage of the Internet Archive. We just seen like another example of the fact that all this infrastructure, none of this infrastructure is up all the time. So bits can fail at different points in time, at different moments. So when trying to make this future-proof, you need to try to address this persistency at different levels. So the levels at which we try to address it are the following. So at the level of the web and HTTP, you have the redirection of the Perl to our own domain that will allow us to migrate in the future, or to pass it on to other people to maintain. This when it works, and when it doesn't work, you still have the possibility of having persistent identifiers attached to this. And thanks to the integration between Zenodo and GitHub, every release that we make of the multi-commentary, for example, any GitHub release gets automatically a DOI that can be cited in publication when referring to the content of the multi-commentary, and this DOI, even when the website will not be able to be accessible, will provide a copy of the sources of the commentary, the code that produced it, and also a static version, HTML, JavaScript, and CSS that can be deployed somewhere else. So at the level of the web, at the level of the software, we addressed it by having an application, a commentary that can be statically compiled. And at that point, even if your library wants to preserve it or your institution, it's just a matter of copying those files to a simple HTTP server and then running it there, which hopefully, even if our dependencies stop working, it will still be supported as long as HTML, CSS, and JavaScript will be supported. And even if that fails, we still have the fact that the data sources that are used to compile the commentary are available as plain text in format that are pretty standard. I haven't shown the bibliography, but the bibliography can be easily exported from Zotero by using the CSS JSON export, and then you will place it into the bibliographies folder, and then from here you will have the identifier that you need to cite when you're writing your own glosses. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to discuss any questions or thoughts you might have.
Great. Thank you very much, Matteo and Charles. This sounds like a really very useful tool, and particularly the concerns about the sustainability of the project and the future proofing is really, really important. So thank you for telling us about that as well. If you're watching live online on YouTube, please do put any questions in the chat and we can read them out. And I'll open up for the floor for questions from the room here in London first.
I'll start.
Yes.
Great. So I am completely new to digital humanities, and everything you've said, half of it is Greek to me. But I wondered about, this was obviously designed with multi-commentaries in mind. What about similar genres like annotated texts for teaching? I have an annotated text that is in 11 languages. Are there possibilities for moving this model onto different but similar genres like that?
I think it can be used for example, to show annotations. Like, if you use it in a teaching context, you might want to have your students, for example, asking them to write a comment on the text, and then you can use this platform to display those annotations. It was not designed to display translations, even though that's something that in some cases, and maybe Charles can comment on this if he wants, you want to show also the translation in addition to the comments, but you can of course use the, instead of having your own comment, you just put one or multiple translations, and then you can also hijack this into a way of publishing, for example, translations of text. So instead of having your, I don't know if I'm still screen sharing, but instead of having your comment, your glossa written, you will have here, similarly to what we did with the translation of another comment, here you can have a translation of the text. So let's say you want to translate this line, or you want to translate several lines in the body of your glossa, you can just put your translation. But it was not meant for translations. But Charles has been working on trying to rearrange this display in order to potentially have the column where now the commentaries are displayed to display a translation of the text. I don't know if you want to comment on this, Charles.
I may have explained myself poorly.
Sorry.
But the book I'm working with has the Latin text and then glossaries in different languages and in 2 different languages with annotations. So it's like a commentary, but designed to showcase multiple, or to provide the tools for people to translate into different African languages.
Yeah. There might not, that's not something that we have, the functionality that we have.
Okay.
Of course, there in the where you can edit your own commentary, you can put as anything that you can write up in Markdown.
Yeah.
And the image here, it's an image that is online. We haven't played much, but potentially one could try to integrate, for example, tree banks, so annotated syntactic structures of the text, and have them displayed as an embedded frame inside. So you can probably push it, even though it was not made for that. Yeah. You can probably push it quite a bit because in itself it's quite flexible as an environment. There are some requirements, like the fact that the text you are commenting on should be available, for example, as TI-XML. So there is one of the, that's why also why we emphasize it, one of the requirements for this to work. So you need to be able to then address it by this CTS, this identifier syntax. But if you have that, you can probably push it and hijack it in a way that maybe respond to your needs.
Because there's not much that I've seen in digital humanities that addresses teaching in a multilingual society, so I'm just like looking for tools.
Yeah, and the idea was also of doing this, it was also to make, I mean, there are still some technical concepts that you need to understand in order to also be able to publish a commentaries like this. That's why we're suggesting that, for example, could be a good way to use it in teaching, because you can teach students 2 things at the same time. You can teach them how to publish your own commentary with a few technical concepts, and then you can use it as a way to address this multilingual need. Do you want to add something on the translations, Charles?
Yes, I just wanted to piggyback on what you were saying about hijack is exactly the word that I would use. Matteo is right. This was built around TEI-XML and CTS URNs, but the real trick is the CTS URN. So you actually don't need a TEI-XML base text. You just need a base text that is addressable via CTS URN right now. And eventually, that should be a base text that is addressable by any URN. We've just started with CTS because it's a citation schema that we're both familiar with from working in classical studies. But I think it would be, I think it might be one of those things that surprisingly works. And I will say right now, one of the projects that I'm working on with this library uses a Word document as the base text that is then transformed into URN addressable text chunks so that the comments can be attached there. So that's also, and again, that just relies on Pandoc and a couple of filters that look for a specific syntax in the Word document. So while the use case that you're describing is not yet officially supported, it's something that could be made to work with the current stack.
Another question from here in the room.
Yeah, I'm really just sort of piggybacking on that question, really. I was also going to ask about translation, partly because of the sort of truism that a translation is a form of commentary, right? It's a way of commenting on the text. It requires interpretation, and so I immediately imagine people would want to put translations into some of those, or various aspects of translation, whether that be individual glosses, whether that be snippets of translations. But I was wondering more about whether you imagine integration with other existing tools for doing this sort of thing, such as the various translation alignment tools that we have, like Ugarit or similar, that enable you to take, either multiple translations or a base text and a translation and align parts of them to each other. I guess, I mean, no matter how much sort of hijacking you've talked about for this, I doubt we'd want to try and hijack this to replicate the functionality of something like Ugarit. But is there some way we could integrate? I mean, can you imagine integrating some of those sorts of features or linking between? I mean, maybe this is a solved problem.
No, it's interesting that you mentioned Ugarit, because it's one of the things that we use while teaching a few courses related to this project. And then we use them with students to show them different translations and how in different languages the translation would change to the text. The main problem there, and also with using tools like Ugarit, is that the translation needs to be aligned with the base text. So whenever you use a text, a translation that is not based on the same text, and then you compare two translations that have two base texts, then you run a bit into troubles for aligning things, because you align translations, but the Greek text that they are based upon doesn't align necessarily. So that was one of the problems. Whether we want to push that Kōdōn to integrate those functionalities, I'm not sure. Probably not. But yeah, having, at least for the text we display, the possibility to see a translation or switch between translations on the side, I think that's something that is probably needed and will be interesting, useful to have. Also, depending on the audience you want to address. So if you're addressing students, then you may want to, most of the times, display a translation when you're commenting the text. If the students are more advanced, then you might not want to have the translation and just give them the commentaries and the primary text. But that's something that has come up again and again as something that we need to do.
And yeah, a lot of these comments are full of translations. I mean, Jeb's a good example.
Yeah.
Great big chunks sometimes in his note. There'll be a big chunk of English before he talks about the passage he's talking about.
Yeah, and Finglas does the same. So Finglas translates it does actually this commentary almost sentence by sentence, and then organized by sentence, and then provides a translation, and then digs into like specific words. But if you extrapolate the translations from Finglas, you get a full translation of the text as well. So that's because it's so important how you translate it for then what you were going to say in the commentary. But the three things are very related.
What I wasn't thinking of, but while you were talking, it sort of came to mind, was the use case where you have a commentary on a translation, and you could generate a commentary. So not necessarily commenting on the translation, but just where the person wants the benefit of commentary, maybe not the philological commentary on individual words, but the broader commentary on interpretation. But they're a reader who's going to be reading it from the English or whatever modern language it's translated into, and it strikes me that that's not served probably by commenting on the Greek and then having a translation alignment behind it, enabling them to get that. But if you're commenting on the sort of line or passage rather than individual words level, then possibly you could have the translation, view a translation and see your various commentaries from that interface rather than from the Greek or whatever other ancient language.
Yeah.
So if I can jump in really quickly, the Beyond Translation folks have a self-healing concept for citations that essentially climbs up the URN tree when it encounters a citation that it can't find. And it strikes me that I've been meaning to build that into the Kōdōn like mapping as well, where you would be able to, so we can comment the like Finglass and Jeb style comments on entire episodes. Those are just get attached to the first line number. As you saw, we talked today about commenting on tokens because that kind of shows off the fuller breadth of what this library can do, but you can also comment on lines or spans of lines. And that would enable comments that are on individual tokens in another language to climb up that citation tree. So say you have a comment on Manon in the Iliad, but you have Wilson's translation that you're working with in class. And rather than need to do the whole translation alignment in the background and say, okay, this maps to Rage in her translation, and you could just say this maps to book 1, line 1. And here are all the comments that go there. Just keep climbing up the tree until you run into like a part of the URN that you don't want to cite, like probably the work level is where you would stop.
What do you do about textual variants?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So what we were hoping to do was to align the commentaries by first aligning the text editions they are based on. But this implies having the critical text for all the commentaries that you have, which at the end we were not able to do it. So what we did was to align to a base text. So this works for variants. So when the lemma differs from the word that is printed in the text, just because we kind of force it. We use if the lemma is the variant is on a single lemma, then we just use the whatever lemma from the base text to create the link. The only case where this fails, and then the commentary is still displayed thanks to this self-healing mechanism that Charles was referring to, is the case where the lemma used in a commentary is deleted, corresponds to a deletion in the base text. And this happens sometimes. In very few cases, but there are a couple of me that are at some point deleted in the edition we are using. So they will disappear if it was not for this mechanism that Charles was referring to, but you don't see them here in the online version because it's a commentary, for example, that is under copyright. So that was a tricky problem to solve. So the ideal way would be having CTS-ORNs for all the editions of the text and then aligning them essentially word by word between these editions, and then each commentary will point to its own base text, to its own critical text. But then in reality, what we're doing is then to force all the commentaries to refer to a common base text.
But one day,
yeah.
One day. I mean, I think that's the thing, isn't it? This is a step on the road.
Hopefully, yeah.
But I've got two questions. One is, I mean, this is about the history of scholarship, right? I'd like to know first, I mean, what I'd really like to see is aligning this with ancient commentaries. And I mean, the Ajax is perfect because Ajax has this wonderful bit where Ajax says, oh, well, she only said, when the woman, his wife tried to stop him committing suicide, oh, well, she only did that because women are mad, you know. And she's actually representing sanity. But the passage then gets reused in Florilegia about women, showing how useless they are. A beautiful piece of recycling. And presumably it would be perfectly easy to do this with ancient commentaries. The structure, once you've created the structure, there's no reason why you shouldn't put ancient commentaries in, which would be wonderful. But the other thing I want to know about is the relationship between commentaries. When you get phrases, there are certain phrases which are almost repeated in almost sort of Homeric kind of way. People always say, in English literature, the classic one is talking about Marlowe and saying Marlowe killed in a tavern brawl. And you will find Marlowe killed in a tavern brawl. Those very words endlessly repeated. It becomes sort of trope. How can I use this to analyze the progress of commentaries and the birth and the process through?
Yeah, that's a very well. Also, this is a very interesting question. But also the one before, your point before about having the ancient scholia in there.
Yes.
That's, of course, that's where we're dreaming. That's a bit where we're dreaming to go next, because of course, you find lots of references to the scholia in the commentaries, but you can also see when you start looking at them in chronological order. For example, Finglas relies on scholia much less than previous commentators used to. So what I've noticed analyzing a few passages of the text was that previous centuries relied much more on the knowledge of the scholia, and you find it a bit less in Finglas, whereas Finglas, for example, is bringing in other commentators on other texts, for example, like a contemporary commentary on Aeschylus or Aristophanes that you don't find in previous literature. This tendency to use contemporary commentaries. But yeah, having kind of also the ancient scholia there would be very nice in order to see how much of those scholia made it through time, essentially, to the modern commentaries. But your second point was about
the relationship between commentaries.
Yeah, so that's a comparison that we were hoping to be able to do automatically to some extent. So it's if you want, a case of text reuse. So you can take this text and try to see whether paraphrases or bits and pieces occur in different glosses. Technical feasibility of that was hindered by the fact that these commentaries are in 6 different languages, including Latin. So there was kind of a mix of languages and also cross-language text reuse. That was before we built some model, was not possible to do it. And then when we had the model, we didn't have time to do it. But when you start comparing, by close reading these commentaries, you do see also some patterns. For example, patterns of loci paralleli, so other sources.
Very often.
And you start seeing them also in sequences, like where they occur. And then once you have all the commentaries, you can try to see at which point they occurred for the first time. And then you spot immediately. I had a couple of instances where you find a sequence of loci paralleli that comes into Finglas straight from Garby. So essentially the same set of loci paralleli, you will find it again in Finglas, maybe with a few expansions. So once you start having things side by side, you can start noticing, for example, who was the first one to introduce a certain passage and from which point in time that passage was picked up upon and expanded by others, or also some sequences of things that tend to repeat. These are some things that you start seeing, and then you also notice things like, for example, INS. I don't know if I'm still screen sharing or if we can put up the multi-commentary on a screen. Here you only see kind of part of it because you don't have the copyrighted commentaries, but INS is the word that is most commented upon by the commentaries we have in the second episode, which is a word related to the cycle of the night here. The reading is not very clear, so there are a couple of possibilities. It's not a reading that will change dramatically the interpretation of the second episode. So the second episode has lots of literature about the Trugrede, so the famous reception speech. And what we are seeing here is a lot of concentration on a philological detail that is not necessarily directly related to the main topic that is being discussed by the literature on this second episode, which is more about the deception speech. So there seems to be kind of a gap between what the commentators have kind of focused a lot about, like one detailed word of the text, and then the broader interpretation of this passage.
And some of the verbal stuff will even be reflected in some of the older lexica. I think, especially with a very core text like this, it'll turn up in the lexica quite early on, and you'll see again, I think it's how these scholars are influencing one another that is potentially in there.
Ancient lexica, but also contemporary lexica. Because if you take the LSJ and you compare it with the Anglophone commentaries, you see.
Yeah, Hermann cites a few definitions from the ancient lexica in his time, for example.
Great. We have one comment online from Sebastian Heath saying this is a great conversation and thanks to the speakers. Any last final questions either from online or in the room for Matteo and Charles? I
do have another question. I could probably ask Matteo this privately, but it's a slightly more general question, but it's I think very small. I was thinking about the what you were saying about the TEI of the text being commented upon, just needing to be able to be CTS addressed. I think it was Charles made that point. So it doesn't have to be a particular flavor of TEI that you've invented for this. So presumably that means existing TEI files with these things that could be very richly annotated, for example. A lot of the annotations can then be ignored because all you're looking at is the citation structure. And so my very specific question is about whether this this could be used to comment on or to record commentaries on epidoc files. And the specific technical issue with that is that many years ago, the authors of the CTS specification criticized epidoc a lot, and epidoc hasn't changed since, because the main citation structure is the line number, and those don't use containing elements. They use milestone elements to flag that citation structure, and that's not something that can change. So is that still a problem with CTS, and would that therefore be a problem for Kōdōn?
Do you want to address this question, Charles?
I might have to take a look at some specific examples, but my off-the-cuff answer is that this shouldn't be a problem, because ultimately the TEI XML is a requirement only because we've written a couple of scripts to translate that into the format that makes it easy to preserve the site as a whole. So the TEI XML is still treated as the canonical representation of the text, or the epidoc in this case is the canonical representation of the text, but we want to preserve it in this intermediate JSON format as well, so that, like Matteo said, we can have the whole site at once. So what's actually important here is that you can transform whatever canonical storage format, TEI XML, a Word document, epidoc, into this JSON structure that we have annotated, and I'm working on the documentation, and that those nodes are addressable. So the discrepancy between CTS and epidoc that you've described, I don't think would present issues in this case.
Music to my ears, thank you.
Great. We do have one question from the chat as well, from Mengjin Yue. Are there any plans to include manuscripts or that sort of text that could be compared alongside images that would allow for more effective visualization of classical text editions? So things like transcriptions, making use of AI tools to engage with the texts, the materials that include various types of writing, writing such as ancient commentaries and layered textual traditions. Would similar approaches combining images and critically edited texts and enabling collaborative annotation be considered or already in development as part of your project?
For now, no. I would say that these are not, that they're not part of the planning of the project. Even though some part could be, some of these things could be done. It's a bit difficult to, since it's all chunked up the different parts of the question, but we really tried to focus on one thing, on the commentaries, because they were a bit neglected. We found in the digital tooling that was available, you find a lot for editions, but you find much less for commentaries. So we try to address commentaries specifically, more than trying to go in many different directions with other type of manuscripts. But of course, quite a few of these things can be imagined for possible extensions of this. But I would say there are different projects, and hopefully we'll be able to work on these in the future.
Yeah, if I know I keep jumping in at the end of these, but I just wanted to say I think those are great ideas, and the glossi are kind of meant to be a bit of a blank slate that people can iterate on and develop, and hopefully eventually pull in their own libraries and things that can work on the client side. The suggestions and feature requests like this would be very welcome on the repositories for Kōdōn or something like this. So even though we might not be able to get to it for a while, it's something that I think we should absolutely keep in mind. Thank you for this.
Brilliant. Great. Well, thank you very much to both of our speakers today, Matteo and Charles. Thank you to our audience here in London and online for all of your questions. The next Digital Classicist seminar will be the 20th of June, here live in London and online on YouTube as well. And that will be Valentina Lunardi and Barbara McGillivray on static and contextual embeddings for tracking semantic change, and the case of Christian Latin. So see hopefully many of you in 2 weeks for that.